So next up we've got the future technology in credit and collections. So just while we swap over. Who do we have? I don't think Richard can be with us. We've got Eddie Harrison from DCB Legal. We've got Mark Oppermann from Aryza, and Kyle MacDonald from Financial Cloud. So as we look into final session, I say we're going to talk about the future technology in credit and collections. Again, we've looked a little bit around what are some of the key stories from 2025, the rest of 2025, and some of the challenges we've had around technology. And so we ran a couple of surveys around that. Replacement of legacy systems came out as a big challenge that people had around, and legacy systems in general. Consumer duty, probably driving technology investments, digital ecosystems, self-serve, expansion of self-serve, automation, some of the topics we've already talked about, nudges and behavioral science discussions. So there's quite a lot talked about, like new ideas, new technology, really driven from new processing power that sort of came out, and sort of that came out in the conversations, over the year. And I suppose just to kick off, I mean, maybe Mark, I'll go with you first. I mean, what have you seen in terms of like response to technology or like investment in technology amongst the kind of the customer base you kind of look at?
Yeah, I think.
What's the year been like? Has it been like bubbling? It feels like there's been more investment in technology.
Huge, yeah. And I think the whole sort of AI world, and we've heard so much about it today. It's nearly sort of, it's gone. It's such a hype. Everybody has to think about it, and everybody has to bring it into their business. But actually, a bit what some of the panel were saying earlier, you have to actually understand what's the value it's going to do. What is it going to do in real terms? Rather than just talking about technology for technology's sake, it's what actually is. And that actually is where I think there's a bit of a disconnect at the moment. There's a lot of hype, but the hype sometimes isn't connecting fully to actually the real business benefit. And that sometimes there's an education. I sort of have sort of a bit of a sometimes laugh with people and go, look, AI, it's not a magic blanket. Because sometimes people think it's this magic blanket, you throw it over the problem, and all of a sudden everything gets fixed. It's not at all, and that's where I think there's still a lot of education to happen about that understanding. Because when you boil it back, it's just about automation. Yes, it's very clever and it can do a lot more than ever before, but sometimes people they nearly have too much of an expectation. And like anything in life, on any of the technologies, start small and build it up to more complex, because otherwise if you jump in at the deep end, it's probably going to end in tears. So that really is what I'm seeing out there. There's a huge amount of hype, huge amount of talk about it, but really where the applications that I'm seeing really deliver value, it's actually taking that stepped approach and fully understanding and linking it with a business benefit rather than just, yes, we've got clever technology.
But as I've sort of talked with, I suppose, technology vendors across the space, it feels like, let's say, last year was maybe a little bit quieter, but this year everyone seems to be really, really busy, and either busy with implementation or there's, and from a financial services point of view, talk with the firms, they seem to be busy with implementation as well. So it feels like there's been an uptick in sort of investment in things. I mean, Kyle, I don't know if you kind of, is that fair if you look at your business and sort of like those kind of things? Do you think there's been a mindset change? Maybe like we've got to invest in this stuff for data as an example, or?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Mark. I think what he's saying is AI is a tool. I think also we need to kind of break down that there's different types of AI. We're talking like AI like it's one solution, and we need to break down, because AI has been around for 2 decades. We use it day in, day out for stuff, and organizations use it deeply embedded already. What's relatively new, I suppose, is generative AI. And when we look at these solutions, they're solutions that we can use within our business, but we need to understand how do we want to use them. We need to come up with a solution and how we're going to implement them, and then we're actually going to operationalize them. And that's often the kind of most difficult part. And there's foundational stuff that needs to happen in order for that to be successful. And I've heard it throughout every single one of these sessions. We talk about data and being able to like manage and orchestrate your data properly. It is that kind of foundational step. You can go so far right now by just keeping stuff the way it is just now. This industry, I think, unlike a lot of others, is very much batch driven from what we see. When we speak to a lot of clients, they're still using, you know, their data warehouse is kind of their kind of key piece that they pull stuff from, they report from, and it's a very reactive tool. You know, you consolidate all your information there. But when we're starting to look at stuff like AI, we need to start to think about more like data clouds. We need to be able to consolidate that data in a place that we can actually operationalize it, in which case we can deeper use AI within our business to actually use it in a meaningful manner to get good solutions out. If we try take some of the shortcuts, which I'm not saying you shouldn't do, because you definitely make gains on it, but there will be like a point where it doesn't go much further, that you actually fundamentally have to look at the foundations that you're building off of and just restructure that so that you can actually take it to the next level. And I think that's kind of what we're starting to kind of see people understand, is that they're going to have to invest in that. You know, they're looking at their current systems, they're saying, okay, it does X, Y, and Z, that'll take me this far, but if I want to take that next step, I'm going to have to invest in the underlying infrastructure to make that possible. And that's where we're seeing a lot of kind of like growth just now, and a lot of conversations that people are starting to look at those gaps.
I mean, Eddie, what's your kind of view?
I agree with both of you.
That's it. So do you think, I mean, are you guys looking at more investment, or the businesses you're at or you've been at? I mean, do you think there's a sea change? We have to have that sea change. I mean, the data points kind of like well taken, I think, in terms of like, is that what's driving it?
Yeah, I think what people want is changing all the time. So I think it's probably an interesting one to ask the audience, who are all enthralled, as I can see, looking at AI tools on their phones possibly. But how many of you have said or heard these words in your business? We need AI. We need more AI, and I need it now. Hear it all the time. So you hear business owners all the time saying, we need AI, and I need it now. But what they can't answer is what they need AI for, other than my competitors have got it, so I need it, and I need it like quicker than they can get it. And it all boils down to what's the problem that you're trying to solve, and getting people to think about that first. Because AI, and as you've just said, there's lots of different types of AI. They all do different things. But you have to start with the problem first. And I think certainly over the last maybe 6-9 months, I've started to hear people talk about problems first. Whereas a year ago it was AI, we must get it in and we need it quick. So getting people to start thinking from the problem. I have a problem. How do I solve it? Is the solution an AI tool? Is it a piece of technology? Or actually, is it that I need to get my data in better shape? I can't tell how to fix this problem because my data's not telling me the answer. Is it that I don't have the data? Is it the data's not structured properly? It's not in a way, it's not in a cloud, it's not in a lake, it's not in any fit shape. And the other part that is kind of coming to the fore is the conversation around how you convert kind of the data into the solution. Because frankly, and I won't use French terminology, but the correct terminology, which is rubbish in, rubbish out. So you start with the problem, you then work through the data, make sure you've got the right data first, then you can feed it into your solution. The solution might be a fantastic tool like Aryza, which has lots of AI in it. Or it could be just a generic data processing tool, doesn't need any AI. Or it could be open banking. So I've heard a lot more around problem, data, solution, and sometimes that means, oh, we don't need any AI. Actually, I need that thing over there. And that's been helpful, and it's good to hear conversations like that as opposed to go and get me AI tomorrow, because that's not always the answer.
Rather provocatively.
One of the things there, Chris, it's funny you say that, Eddie, because if I go back 3 and 4 and 5 years, the whole hype thing was all around digital journey. We need a digital journey for our customers. And I remember at an event like this, somebody comes up and goes, oh, you do digital journeys? Yeah. Oh, we need that. And exactly the question was, well, why do you need it? Oh, well, one of the board members said we need to do that because we need to be more relevant to our customers. Absolutely no business benefit, bar we think we need it. So you need to get past that, and as you say, talk about what's the real business benefit that you're going? And actually, sometimes it's not technology that you need.
I was going to say, I mean, have we reached peak AI? So is AI sort of going to fade, or at least go into the background? At least anyway, is rather, Kyle.
Yeah, so I don't think so. A lot of people talk about, is there an AI bubble? Yeah, probably in certain like sections. Like there's certain companies that got investment as a result of hype, but AI as a whole is here to stay. The one thing that I go back to people and I'd say is like, if I was to take ChatGPT away from you right now, or if I was to double or triple the price of it, I bet you would pay it. Like it's a useful tool, and I think that really kind of shows that it's a core service that people want to use, and almost everybody. I'd be surprised if not every single person in this room uses AI, and that says something. Like a bit of service. I don't think that there's a bubble in the sense of the use case for it, but there are kind of like companies that I think have got money that probably shouldn't have due to a rush. What we probably should be thinking about when we're using AI though, and which is key, and it's key about kind of any of these kind of solutions, is where to use it and where not to use it. Like you can implement solutions all over the place, but there is a cost base. You know, it's going to cost you to implement. You could implement a dozen different solutions, but at what point do you say no? Because at the end of the day, you need to pass that cost on, and your business needs to be, you know, it needs to be profitable. So it's kind of tailoring kind of the solutions to use it and build out a journey which is which suits your business and suits your customer, and that the what you've put in place is right. You know, I think too many people are just jumping on the bandwagon and they're just spending money on stuff, and actually there's not good outcomes. And that's something you need to, I think, strip back and really kind of understand, you know, problem, solution, measure it and make sure it's right, and then kind of move on to the next thing and not just keep rolling stuff out unchecked.
Yeah. I mean, one of the problems that definitely is, and we saw that in the previous slide, was legacy systems and integration with legacy systems. I mean, what should be the best approach for that, particularly when implementing new technology? I mean, how do we think about that? Because we all get very excited about new tech going in. Often it just gets overlaid on quite poor processes, or old processes anyway, in the background, when we have to navigate that. I mean, what's the best way for us to think about navigating that, and then creating a change plan to get to more sort of future-orientated sort of data structures, those kind of things? Mark, I don't know if you got your view. I mean, how would you do that? For example, you're implementing with the client. How do you must come across it all the time.
Listen, all the time. And now, I would have to say the legacy systems aren't so much, they're not as big a problem now as they would have been. So, you know, APIs and all the rest, people talked about them 5, 6, 7 years ago. They actually use them today. But one of the things is, and we sort of touched on it already, just take a step back and say, what are you looking to achieve? No, stop talking about technology. What's the business objective that you're looking to achieve? Because sometimes it's just that approach needs to be a small bit of re-engineering. You don't need to actually change everything. And then sometimes it's about overlaying just new processes on where you could actually just make improvements. And it's that small step by step, because people don't like change. Companies don't like change. And it's a case of where you have to bring them on that journey. Now, one of the big things for us would be that you have to be able to, like, we talk about conversational AI, we talk about, you know, sort of, this is what you do, but people are looking at you sometimes and they kind of go, well, we don't do that today. Jesus, I don't know, where do we start? So you have to nearly put the comfort blanket around them, give them examples, bring them on that journey to help them understand, because everybody talks about AI, but there's a huge gap between understanding what it does, and then deploying it in your business. So that is where I think there is a bit of a gap at the moment, and that's certainly something that when we're helping our customers and clients about sort of that sort of deployment, you have to be cognizant of what they have, but you definitely have to be able to bring them on that journey step by step. Because if you try to jump in at the deep end to do everything at the first, you're just gonna make a mess of it. Yeah. So you have to take that steady approach, but also have a very clear signpost for people. This is new for most organizations. There is going to be fear. There's going to be uncertainty and doubt. So you have to be able to approach that, not just go, you need it, it's AI, it's sexy, it's all the hype at the moment. It has to be real for them.
Yeah. Eddie, what's your kind of view around, I suppose, managing that change management process where you've got to like implement and talk about some of the changes of data structures as well? I mean, because it's change, and to Mark's point around people change as well.
Yeah, I think it's as much about, having to think about potential legacy systems as it is about thinking about a real big one, which people tend to forget about, which is legacy policy and legacy approach. Technology is moving far faster than we can move as businesses, because we have all the governance, we have the controls in place to make sure we're making the right decisions, or a lot of companies do. But what then gets in the way is legacy policy, where policies will drive us to do certain things, or they'll govern how we do things that don't necessarily consider the tools that we're trying to implement. So a perfect example is using large language models for helping to check code in an IT department. I've written a code, I want this tool to test it and check it to make sure that it's accurate. Well, how do I know that it's telling me the truth? I'm just going to take it and trust it. Well, then I'm going to put it into a live environment. Well, my policy tells me that I can't do that, because my policy doesn't even know that an LLM existed when it was written 5 years ago. And so compliance won't allow me to deploy this thing, even though I think it's been double, triple checked and so on and so forth. And so it ends up just dragging the process along while you say, leave that with me, I'll go and rewrite that policy, give me 3 months. And so as much as legacy systems we're trying to integrate with things, it's the legacy approach and getting people in the mindset. I can't remember who it was earlier on who spoke about training people in businesses on how to use technology, how to understand what AI is or how it operates. Because for those that will have used ChatGPT and all the rest of it, I can guarantee you none of you have got the answer out of a ChatGPT tool the first time around. That's not quite what I meant. What I meant was, well, you have to add something to it. You have to know what you're talking about and what you're expecting as an output to use it properly. You can never use the first result, of course. So getting people into businesses who understand how these things operate, upskilling and training people within the business to consider, what does that mean? What effect does that have on me if I start using these tools? How does that affect the policies and the procedures that we have within the business? How does that affect how our systems will talk to one another? So there's a huge, huge industry in the making, if you like, in terms of upskilling and training that doesn't really exist yet. You can get experts like Dan, who was talking a little while ago, to come into a business and help you, but that's one person. Where's the help? Yeah. It's a good business idea for somebody.
The other interesting idea that came up just a little while ago is what happens if AI goes down? And we talk about AI, we talk about some of these large language models, particularly proprietary ones.
We did the other day.
And the whole piece, we did with Cloudflare, right, for some folks around the world. What's the business continuation plan for that? And particularly if you're using large language models, if your prompt then gives you a different answer, right? So if you're using an online one, I mean, how do we sort of start to think about business continuation plan for AI? And I suppose somewhat mitigated, I suppose, if you use offline models. But I mean, Kyle.
So I think it's a bit like any other kind of DR situation. You shouldn't just be reliant upon cloud. These can be done on platform as well, so you don't have to always rely upon Google or Amazon or OpenAI for their models. The DR situation there should be that there's open source models that you can just flick over to. For us, it's layering the AI approach. 100% right. I'd say, see if you went on to ChatGPT right now and you were to input something, it's probably not going to give you a perfect answer. But that's because you're asking a generic model. a question. What we should be doing, and at Financial Club, what we build is much more specific. So we believe more in embedding the AI within the platform, because really what matters when it comes to getting a good prompt out is context, and you need to be able to build that context window. And there's a couple of different kind of layers to that, and you can do it to some extent if you played around in some of these products by giving like knowledge bases and so forth. But when you ask a question, you really need to be able to bring on board, if it's a bit specific customer, that customer's information. You also then have to bring on board the departmental and business processes so that the actual AI understands, well, how did your business actually do that? Because your business is not the same as everyone else's. So if you can't tell it how your business works, it's not going to give you the answer you need. It's going to give you a generic answer. And then finally, you have to actually layer in the actual industry knowledge. And only by kind of layering in and giving a really kind of detailed context to the AI can you get accurate answers out. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect. Like anyone that tries to say that they're going to give you an AI that's going to do the work for you and it's going to replace your workforce, avoid 100%. The models don't work like that. The maths doesn't work out. Really, all you can kind of do is reduce down. Is it going to be 40%? Is it going to be 50, 60, 70, or 80% right? Human in the loop is definitely the approach, at least for the next, as far as I can see. I think once you get kind of those like hyper-specific answers based upon that kind of dynamic context, it starts to become much, much more useful, because if you get up to the point where you're getting an answer back which is 80, 90% of the way there, the benefit of that human in the loop is it can actually help train your model. By saying that, by approving it or actually making edits to it, you can actually just start to make it better and better over time. And that's really where you get these efficiency gains and what we should be aiming for. And that's kind of the next stage that everyone's kind of moving on to just now, which, the pot is, agentic AI. That's where the real benefit's going to come to businesses. And we'll start to see massive efficiency gains. So you'll start to see, and I don't think, to be honest, we're going to see an absolute collapse in staff numbers. What I think we're probably going to see is there'll be a reduction, but we'll actually end up having to need more expert staff. So it'll be fewer high-quality jobs that are going to be needed. And I think the actual outcome then for businesses and consumers is going to be much better, because it's going to be more consistent. It's going to be more aligned with what the industry, your business, and what the actual customer kind of expects. So I'm really excited, for the next kind of couple of years and seeing kind of how that develops out. And it's just really exciting kind of working with organisations going through that journey.
And as an example, earlier in the day we talked about OpenAI. I mean, is that a caution or a lesson for us in terms of, like, I suppose, particularly on the account information services? I mean, there was a lot of hype around that. The adoption probably hasn't lived up to the hype, but it has been steadily increasing over time, and there's been real fundamental problems being solved as a result of OpenAI being implemented, which is probably a little bit more complex than we thought. Is that an illustration of what we think what AI implementation is going to be, which is we had a lot of hype, but now it's going to be sort of going to solving these problems, which is probably a little bit more complex?
So if I take that one, I think the massive problem just now is most of the companies that have built out these solutions are generalists. So the problem there is you look at Salesforce. Salesforce is not financial services specific. They don't know our industry inside out. They're developing AI solutions which fit their entire business model, because that's how they make the big bucks. What we need to really be considering is what does it have to look like in our industry? Tailoring the models, helping it train on our regulation, the updates there, and building kind of frameworks in place that are actually useful for us, because the generic models that these large kind of US companies are kind of developing, they're not going to probably provide the results that we really want in the long term. I think that's going to come from, and we are going to see, I think, a fragmentation of the market, where you're going to see lots of small kind of providers coming out with more hyper-specific kind of models that kind of tick the boxes for kind of key industries. That's my general thought.
A lot, and agree with you there, that it's already happening, that those principles of the large language model, they're being now adopted in life sciences, in medical. So there's a lot more of those. Look, it's funny. I've had clients talk to me to go, oh, we're going to use Salesforce, we're going to use Amazon Connect, we're going to use, and I'm just smiling at them because, well, go on, off you go. Now make sure when you chat to them that what industry examples can they give you? And let me tell you, this whole AI thing, everybody thinks it's only happened. It's 20 years plus. It's funny, when I talk to our head of AI in the company, he's been doing this something like about 20-something years, started in Stanford, was involved in some of the first versions of AI around Apple and Siri and what have you years ago. But what we've been doing is that, we're managing digital conversations, but we've been at this 5 years. It ain't easy. And I remember for the first couple of years that you've got very little output, because the big challenge is that you're looking to get data in, but you have to make sure that the data that you're taking in and using, you can use to actually train your models. Otherwise, it's going to skew a lot of stuff. So actually, this is hard. This isn't easy. And Kyle, as you said there, that you have to have that credit and collections language model that understands the way people will speak, understands the likes of vulnerability, the different types of vulnerability. So you're going to see more of that happen. But actually, I think that it's not just a credit and collections thing. That's already happening, where you'll see a lot of different companies, smaller companies, taking the principles of that, but actually deploying it in a very deep, rich vertical. Also, what you're seeing is that everybody talks about large language models. That's great, but if I look at what we do, we've got 5 small language models and 2 large language models. All of them are within the platform. We don't let any data go outside, because that is another real challenge for a lot of enterprises. Well, where's my data going? Oh, so it's going on to that, and where does that data reside? And that is a question. But again, it's about not just one, it's about actually a range of different models that you can use to deliver the right business results. So it actually is, it's not just, oh, we're going to use ChatGPT or whatever, Gemini, Bard, the list goes on, Perplexity. We could be here a while, naming a few. But actually, it's about, and more businesses, you'll see that happen, where, like what we've done, is that very industry specific with that deep knowledge. So I think that's the future of where it can bring real value to individual industries.
Well, that's going to be my next question around data security, and particularly in financial services, and just whether and particularly with the Cloudflare outage that happened this week here, is like, how exposed do you think we are as an industry to that? And how exposed are we to making sure we have good data security, particularly in terms of things like AI? It feels like that's a growing topic, but probably it's sort of increasing awareness, but probably isn't wide enough awareness yet. I don't know, Eddie, I don't know what you kind of think. I mean, I think financial services, we're probably more aware of it and probably more cautious than most, but...
I'd like to think so. I mean, generally speaking, the sort of data that we're all handling and dealing with, you tend to have the controls to keep it nice and safe and secure, and that should be the same for these types of models. And you would expect, I won't assume, but you would expect, simple things like data protection impact assessments of tools that you're going to be using to make sure that, is the AI tool, if it's an LLM, for example, is it allowed to use my data to then train its outward-facing models? If you have if you just have a simple OpenAI Pro license, for example, it doesn't allow its models to be trained on your data. It doesn't allow that data to go outside of your kind of ring-fenced version, if you like. How much we trust that? That's probably another question. But the question is, are companies doing the right checks? It's something I think we touched on it when we were talking in the pre-meeting. I've heard firsthand a CTO. It probably won't be CTO for much longer. But I've heard firsthand a CTO say to me, well, we've got a OpenAI Pro license. I said, which one's that then? He said, oh, it's 20 quid a month. That's not the Pro license, that's just a license. That's the same that I can use, that you can use. He said, yeah, it's fine, but they don't use our data to train their models. Are you sure about that? So he pulled it up on his phone and he looked at the terms and conditions and he just looked at me and went, oh, shit. This isn't the professional one, is it? I said, no, it's not. How long have you been using it? He said, oh, about 9 months. So he hadn't done the checks, but what had happened is he'd kind of explained to his compliance person that it's fine, it's this version, et cetera, but they hadn't undertaken any data protection impact assessments. And so as a consequence, all of their data that they'd been putting into this machine for the last however many months is out there somewhere. You could probably go into ChatGPT and ask questions around that business, and you're probably going to get some of the answers that you shouldn't get. And it's a genuine problem that people don't necessarily understand the risks of using the outward-facing tools that are available to all of us. There are professional versions, there are ring-fenced versions, but the ultimate security, and I think Rich is in the room from Kai. Rich and Steve talk about the tools that they have built, that they were using external, and you'll shout at me if I get it wrong, but they use an external LLM for sort of the big processing, but they don't put any PII into that machine at all. Once they get the results from that, they'll then put it through their own small language model, internal, where they do use the PII because it's ring-fenced and secured. So then they get the benefit and the leverage of both approaches. And they've done that, presumably and hopefully, to keep PII secure and also to not give out to the world all of their secrets and all the things that they do as a business. But again, it just takes a different approach. People need to think about these things. And just a last thing is sort of tangential to what you've just asked. I read an article about 2 weeks ago which introduced a brand new concept. I've not heard of this before, which is in-response marketing. Now, I'm not sure people know this, but about 6 weeks ago, OpenAI became it was not for profit. Now it is for profit. So it's just an enterprise the same as any other. They need money. It's a very hungry, pricey process. Now they have licenses, they have subscriptions, they have enterprise models. But they were talking about this new concept of in-response marketing. And not that they're going to do it, but that it's a thing and it will happen at some point. And what that means is when you're asking a tool for an answer, is it going to give you the answer that you need? Or is it going to give you the answer that it's getting paid to give you? It's a new concept, something that's starting to creep in and starting to be talked about. But again, you couple that with making sure that you've got proper DPIA, proper protections around PII, but then also trust. How do you trust the machine that you're using?
And where do we sit with things like data processing capacity in the UK, right? So we'll talk a bit about Amazon Cloud, and they'll say it's ring-fenced in the UK, but you have different levels of processing need depending on what you're trying to do. So if you're building a new model, we probably don't have, I think they would say we probably don't have that in the UK to build a proper full-scale model. That's being done outside. That's one of the problems why Europe doesn't have the models. To run existing models or to retrain existing models, to augment existing models, build smaller models, we probably do. Where do we sort of sit with that, and how do we sort of think about that versus even running it on your local servers as well? Is there an understanding around what you need to run where? And Kyle, I don't know if you have a perspective on that. I mean, is that a challenge for us?
So our view in this is that we don't have billions of pounds to go ahead and train models to the level that Google and OpenAI and so forth are going to be training them. Their models are going to be the most advanced models that we're probably going to use. What we do is we create dynamic context, which means that we get the benefit of the advanced models, but with the hyper-specific kind of answers. That is the most beneficial way we see. There's a lot of places that I think are building and creating, and when I say previously about creating hyper-specific models, it's hyper-specific based upon like context windows, which is very different from like the generic actual LLM models. Training those are incredibly expensive, and you will get smaller ones, but like the approach we think is that we're not we're agnostic to models. We let our customers put in whichever model they want. If they've got their own model, it's their data. They can plumb in their own OpenAI, their own Gemini. They're not restricted to something that we choose. We think that's something that should be open to our customer to choose. And then what we do is we augment that model with by embedding it actually within our platform to pull out the data to actually build the prompt to make it a better prompt, actually a good answer out. So hopefully that kind of answers, because I just don't see that we're going to be building that kind of level of stuff really in the UK. We don't have the infrastructure in place, and I don't see us having it anytime soon. We might be able to do very specific ones, but I don't think we're going to keep pace with the level of development that's happening in the US and China. Like, that's just what's happening.
But there's a big argument around the use of open source models which are run locally, and using those locally where you have data controls over data versus using the online versions, which might be a little bit more powerful. But I mean, because you've got more people looking at those, you've got more versions. They've got versions coming out every day on those.
Yeah, you can use those. Like I say, we're completely agnostic, so we'll go ahead and we've got models that we pull down and we run on our infrastructure, and we can switch those out and we can change them around, or we can opt to use the paid models. It's really kind of what our customer kind of wants, and we can switch that out based upon the agent configuration. So we could have a complaints agent that we build a certain context for, and we say, hey, we want to use Google for that one because we think actually it provides the best. Because not all these models are the exact same. Some are better at different things. So it's being able to just configure what you want to use where. And for us, that's kind of down to the customer to decide. If they want our advice on it, yeah, we'll provide advice and guidance and best practice. But we don't want to restrict people to say that, hey, you're using our model or you have to use this model. You know, we believe it should be, you know, the CTO or the IT department that come to us and say, we would like to use this or trial this. Because in the grand scheme of things, you know, they're in charge. It's their data. You know, it's they're setting it up and they're running it in their business. We need to provide that kind of level of kind of freedom.
Just on that point, it is interesting that I'd agree. You're never going to compete with the big guys. They have so much money they're throwing at it. It's unbelievable. But actually, how are you using that? And then how can you, as you say, be able to swap in and swap out? Because there is lots of different jobs to get done. Sorry, my phone ringing. That is not ideal. But there is. Oh, it's bloody hell, that AI stuff.
Yeah.
But you do need the ability, and that's certainly when you know, you're having that conversation with those businesses that are very specific in a vertical. Obviously, we're talking about credit and collections today. That ability to, as you just quite rightly described, to be able to swap in and swap out, because you do see that what a model does really well today, it is moving so quickly that you may need to use something completely different in 12 months' time. So it's that flexibility, that fleet of foot, that you've architected your product in such a way that you actually will know already, we're going to need to change this. How easy is that going to be for us? Because otherwise, you're just going to be stuck with, again, we talked about a legacy system earlier, all the challenges with, we can't move it because everything's plumbed into it. So that flexibility to change is something that you really need to be thinking about.
How far away are we from taking the human out of the loop on decision making? So we talk a lot about keeping the human in the loop in decision making. Do you think we're going to move away from that? And I was going to use an example. So I was using Copilot the other day, and it wouldn't update a spreadsheet for me with something in it because it's forbidden to do it by policy. It actually told me it did it, but it didn't do it because it's forbidden by policy, because they're being super cautious around it. As a user, I was quite keen to do that. It wasn't sensitive. It was just, you know, just adding a piece of data. The drive there is to sort of make my life easier and to take action, but it sort of takes the human out of the loop. How much of a pressure do you think that's going to be? Because we've been quite resistant to it up to now. Do you think it's going to soften as we go forward? I mean, Eddie, what do you kind of think?
I genuinely can't see a point in the in the sort of future where there isn't a human in the vast majority of these processes in some way, shape or form. Like I said earlier on, if you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out. Well, if you're relying purely on a machine, and the people that are putting the data and the information into the machine and asking for the decisions to be made don't understand the thing that they're asking about, you're not going to get the right result, you're not going to get the right solutions, and ultimately it's not going to be worth using, frankly. You might as well have just used a piece of paper. So, whether it's in the design of what we're using these tools for, whether it's in the testing and checking and the oversight, whether it's in the kind of the feedback loop and making sure that they're being trained on the right information, whether it's testing the outcomes, wherever kind of humans are needed, I think they're going to be there for quite some time. Does that mean that we're going to see a huge reduction in workforce in certain companies from humans? Probably. But probably being deployed into other more value-add roles. I think somebody used the example of Klarna earlier on. We've got this big AI tool that's going to fix everything, get rid of everybody out of the contact center, and then a year later say, we need to hire lots of people into the contact center again. But they're going to do a different thing this time. We've learned from this. As opposed to them answering every single call, we're going to use the AI to triage what comes through to the human. And we're going to make sure that the humans have all got specialisms and they can deal with those specialisms. So instead of just being generalists, you're going to be, really good at this thing where only a human can really have that interaction. So I think we're probably going to augment how workforces are deployed and in what areas based on the tools that we're using. But when are we not going to have humans in the loop? I can't personally see a future where that happens.
Carl,
I don't want one anyway.
Agreed here as well. Look, if you go back, if you read the paper 5 years ago, or the automation, and there'll be nobody in a contact center. All the jobs will be taken by robots. Clearly, that's gone well, hasn't it? But the Klarna example is a real good one. That we, as a business, we've always been telling people, look, you need to get an agent involved. There is always circumstances that you will have to get that speciality of an agent. Automation is great, and automation aided by AI is even better in most instances, but you can't replace what an agent will do in certain circumstances. So the idea of getting rid of that, if I look at sort of our average, say, automation rate across our clients, it's about 85%, a little over. So really high automation, but that last 15% is that blend between getting the automation right, but bringing the power of the agent. And again, both Kyle and Eddie have mentioned it. It's going to morph into, a much higher experienced and a caliber of the job. And if you look down now today, there's jobs that exist today that didn't exist 20 years ago. So, where are there will be those jobs in the businesses that we engage with. We just don't know that they're needed as of yet, but they will as the demand is there. So, I think predicting the demise of humans in the loop in some way, I think it sounds great, but it ain't going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I think kind of the way to think about it is, if your goal is to reduce your contact center staff by 70%, the solution probably isn't AI. If the goal is to have 70% of your interactions with customers resolved without touching a person, the solution probably is AI. But they're different problems with different solutions, and they're going to require different types of humans in both of those processes.
So if I just add that, I think you could replace all the humans with AI. The problem is regulation does not allow you to do it. That's the hindrance. Like, you could do it, but you would have to accept that 5 to 10% of the time it's going to be a problem. And that's just the nature of it. It's fine in sales and marketing because you don't make a sale, but it's not going to be right. It's all about you'll just lose your license. I think someone will try it at some point, and I'm really interested to see it. It'll be a new startup, and they'll do ground up AI, and I'll be interested to see how long they keep a license for before it fails. I think actually the conversation that none of us are actually having that I think will be more interesting in all of this is, we're all talking about us using AI and us having humans in the loop. I honestly think that consumers are going to be our problem because they're not going to have humans in the loop. I predict, I would say, in the next 5 years, a finance app will come out that will manage your finances for you and will just audit everything. And it'll just start contacting our clients, your clients, everyone here, asking for stuff. And I don't think it will be human in the loop. And it'll be interesting to see what the regulator does at that point, because I do not think we're set up for it right now. And whether it happens in a year, whether it happens in 2 years, it will happen. We just had a conversation, was at the very start, that said that some received 300 DSARs. I think that's nothing, honestly. I think you could receive 1,000. And I think the question that people should be asking in here is, like, what are you going to do when you receive 1,000, 2,000 queries coming in that are AI generated and you need to respond to them? Like, how are you going to do that? Because that's where I kind of see it going from a consumer point of view.
That was going to be my following question around fraud, right, as well, which is kind of linked, because some of this stuff is happening already. I think it's already happening. I think fraudsters tend to be a little bit ahead because they invest in this stuff and they don't have the regulations to worry about, or where it's being processed, or private information, because it just all goes out. So it's very easy for them. Is it not all that some of that stuff's happening already, and how do we sort of respond to that?
So. Essentially, I did a webinar on this yesterday, and my view is radical transparency. I would put almost every single piece of information that you have in a customer in an easy, accessible place for that customer to gain access to, and that their AI should be able to access it as well, that you can just point them to it. I think customer portals are going to become incredibly important. That similar to, if you look at like how Facebook does a DSAR request, that's the kind of way we're going to have to go. You go on and you request the information you want, and they gather it together, and you click a button and it's downloaded. And more of that information is just going to have to start being available, like self-service to customers. Anything that you don't put out there, I think will end up just being a problem to you. So and I think that's beneficial for both sides, because I don't think there's anything we should hide from. If the money's due and we have the data, why not give it to the customer? If we don't have it, or we're hiding behind something, then fair enough, they should be querying it. So I think that's probably the way you kind of combat it.
Does that go back to the very top of this conversation around investment in technology and data structures, right, as well, to do that?
Yeah, so that's where fundamentally I think at some point legacy technology is going to become a bit of a hindrance. You're going to have to update your tech to being like AI native. And whether you have to do it in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, it really depends on everyone's organization. But the current kind of infrastructure, I don't see being kind of suitable for the type of processes that we're going to want to kind of put in place, later kind of down the line. You'll be able to bolt stuff on, but I think that'll have a lifespan attached to it.
Mark,
I think businesses are going to struggle, because just picking up on Kyle's comment, what we'll have our personal digital assistants. That may be on your phone, that may be a subscription, that may be even for free. But if you look at that, that will drive the demand. And I think it'll be more the consumers challenging us as a business and industry. Because let's just take a step back for a moment. When did phones really sort of take off? It was around 2000. You pick a 15-year-old then, they're 40 years old now. So it's a case of where there's so many digital natives that they're so used to this technology, they're going to be driving that, and it's a case of where I think businesses, the minute that wave starts to happen, no matter how well, if businesses don't have their data structures in place, and a bit as the example that you've given there, they're just going to be swamped and they're just going to get caught in the mud. So, it is down the road. It will definitely, like any of these things, once it's adopted by consumers, that wave will happen quicker, faster, and bigger than what business does. Business will go slower. So it will be a challenge. I'd be fairly confident of that.
Yeah. Now, we're almost out of time, but we've probably got time for one question. I don't know if anyone's got a question. Yeah, real quick. Maybe just wait for the microphone real quick, just at the front.
Hi. So we were always talking about implementing AI and how important it is from a business perspective and corporational perspective, let's say. But I'm always wondering about AI savvy customers. So these customers can compare, can negotiate, can ask, and I want to know how to deal with these kind of customers, the AI savvy customers.
Yeah, I'll jump in here if you don't mind. Actually, it's just a quick sort of general comment. There isn't that many really savvy AI customers. There's lots of people that will know elements of it, but if you were to say, do people have a really, really in-depth knowledge of AI? Most businesses don't have a range of people that you'd be able to get into a deep conversation about. What they're very good at is they know their business process. And again, a lot of the time, they're looking for advice and guidance because, again, this is new for a lot of companies. A lot of people know let's say the different topics, the different types, mentioned earlier, agentic, adaptive. God, there's probably 20 or 30 different types. People know what it is, but actually that step between knowing what it is and knowing how to deploy it in your business, that really is where, for me, you need somebody to be able to sort of walk them through and walk them on that journey, because there's a lot of pitfalls. You can do stuff really well, but you could also do stuff really quickly. But stuff that you do really quickly sometimes isn't the right thing. So it's about doing it at the right speed, but doing it the right way. And it all has to be, what's the business result that you're focused on? So, and just even, Eddie, you were talking earlier, that it's funny about the AI and the scrutiny around AI. We've got lots of documentation about ISO 27001, policy retention of data, blah, 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 blah. I'm telling you, in a due diligence process with most clients, the documents that get requested least are all the policy on where is the AI stored and how it works and what have you. So we're not actually getting as many questions about AI in that implementation phase, in that due diligence phase, compared to the normal data security type questions. It's just what people are used to, and this is brand new. So it's all about learning.
It's still generic, like it's not very specific from consumer perspective. Like their questions or their input is still generic, not specific to the needs they really want.
Yeah, I think people have a lot of knowledge about AI in general, but it's that step between, it's a bit like using ChatGPT. Give me the answer for this, this, and this. But there is a huge difference between that sort of consumer use, if I was to call it, and how you then deploy that into your business at scale, where it's going to manage, 5,000 conversations in a day or in an hour. There's a huge difference, the gap between that and where you're doing it at scale. It's just phenomenal. There's so many pitfalls that you could actually trip yourself. You think that you're doing the right thing, but you need to lean on the experience of somebody that's done it before, because otherwise you may just drive down the wrong road, and it'll be a cul-de-sac, or it'll just be a cliff that you drive straight off.
Yeah, so I would agree with what Mark said there. It's all of this stuff's expensive to do, and it's not to say I 100% dabble in it. I would. I think everyone's kind of doing that, but when you're putting something in at scale, at enterprise, you kind of want to have a framework in place. And we do it for everything else. I think we definitely want to do that. We don't want to be, for example, our agents sitting using ChatGPT. I think we want to embed it within our systems so that it's controlled, rather than people being able to go off ad hoc and use that themselves. And certainly there's departmental use of it. I'm sure folk can do that, but when you go into kind of a more kind of a regulated kind of work stream, I think having that kind of control framework in place where there's process involved, that you can leverage AI, but you have kind of the safety nets there that that control it and make sure that you're doing everything compliantly. It's recorded, it's auditable. It's super important.
And of course, there's now an ISO for AI. 42,001, is it, I think? I can't remember, but something like that. It should be 36. But yeah, so there's ISO now for AI management, and everybody's now, I've heard people saying, we need to get that. Okay, great. Are you using AI yet? Yeah, I think so. Cool. So have you got policies and procedures and guardrails and all these things that this policy, this ISO is asking for? It's fine, we'll build it. So people are starting to think about it, but and just on the customer savvy thing, they're savvy they think they're savvy, a lot of them. I've got a tool, I've got a question, I don't want to pay my debt, so this is going to help me get out of paying the debt. But they'll ask it the question, what's the answer to the life, the universe, and everything? It will say 36, and they'll send that to us as an answer and trust that it's the truth. So they don't trust the answers, they're not savvy about how to get the right answer, they just trust whatever comes out. Hence, I owe X, and my name is X. Can I please have a DSA, please?
So I think
we see all the time.
That might be an interesting point. Is I think the difficulty with some of these consumer responses via AI will be the false positives, because if I don't know if anyone else has done it in here. I've done it a few times. It's great for pulling a complaint together. It makes it look incredibly, like a lawyer's pulled it together. I send that off, and I think the company must freak out. But it must be an absolute nightmare to respond to. Like, it's not a tier 1, like that's getting referred. And the difficulty is, if it's not even right, you're going to have to respond to the customer, somehow explaining to them that what they've sent through is wrong. So you've instantly got a trust barrier there. And I think that's going to be probably the biggest difficulty with all this, is that you get 1,000 queries through and 800 of them don't even make sense. And you're going to somehow have to go back in 800 and explain why they don't make sense. And just imagine how long that's going to take. Like, it's going to be
and
madness.
how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that I think, is it £250 now that claims management firms have to pay for raising? But that obviously will not cover consumers coming direct, which I think AI will enable. So we've got over one problem, but I think we're going to be hit by another one, which is going to be a lot more difficult.
And the creditor still
regulate.
pays anyway, right?
And the next one might be the infinite AI loop, where the complaint's been generated by AI, it's come into a company, and the person goes, that's going to take too long. ChatGPT, can you give me an answer to that as to why they're wrong, please? And out it goes, and they spit it into them. Do you see what I mean? So this loop of everything within the process becomes generative. There's no human intervention at all, and it just ends up fighting against itself.
And imagine if
good
you
video on
BCC
YouTube
someone as
about
well.
that.
And imagine if you CC someone as well, and it replies to all. Sorry. We're kind of out of time. So it's the end of the session. Maybe just in 2 words, maybe just talk about, we talked about peak hype for AI. Maybe we're being at peak hype. What's the next hype cycle that's going to happen? What have we got to think about for 2026? Mark, maybe go first.
Interesting. I don't think we're at peak hype on AI at the moment. I think there's certainly more of a road ahead. But I think we're already seeing it, and we've touched on it today, that the reality is going to kick in for businesses. And it's not just going to be about the hype. It's going to be, give me real, tangible examples of where it's delivering in the business. So I'd like to think that would be where the market will go. That, yes, still very excited, but actually move the conversation from just the hype into how it's going to help your business. And would encourage people to think it that way.
Okay, Kyle?
I think it's probably look long-term in this. Don't put short-term solutions in place, because this is going to be a long-term play. So when you're really kind of looking at it, I think you need to start off with the data, get that right. If you create a good foundation, you're going to be able to iterate on top of that foundation for whatever comes over the next 10 years. If you just put a solution in place without fixing that base, that will not last you 10 years. So, get your foundations right first of all, and you can build upon it.
Eddie, final word?
Yeah, I'd agree on everything you've both said. as with the rest of the conversation. I think if there's a new hype for next year and it's starting to creep in now, it's probably hyper-personalisation. So we're already starting to see, things like archetypes being used to then drive personalised journeys, which is, when does a person get what type of communication? But I've seen some of the concepts more recently of hyper-personalised videos using the new Sora tools that are out there, where it's delivering absolutely personalised communications and conversations with people at the click of a button. And I think that's going to be quite an interesting thing that will come through in the next year or so, and where hyper-personalisation using this sort of Gen AI can be used. And the other one is more and more use of synthetic data in kind of analytics, which again is interesting, but it also has lots of challenges and things to think about. So yeah, lots more hype words on the way, I think.
Well, I am sure that next year we'll be talking about new things, that's for sure, because it never seems to stop still in this kind of space. So thank you very much to each of you on the panel. Really appreciate that. I'm going to hand over to Colin, but big thank you very much everyone for coming from me. I think we've had some super interesting conversations, super interesting insights, and thank you to all of the panelists as well. So I really appreciate that. Colin, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Chris, and let's all give Chris a massive round of applause because he helps make this event what it is, really. So thank you very much. Obviously, a massive thank you to all the speakers who were listed there. Really appreciate everybody's efforts. We don't just turn up here, we put a lot of effort into putting the content together, so hopefully you all enjoy it, and please share that on social media if you enjoyed it as well. So yeah, thanks very much. Big thank you to our sponsors as well, of course, and those of you, our next event's planned for May next year in Nottingham, so hopefully you'll join us for that, and then some people are joining us at the Technology Awards tonight. But thank you to everybody who's attended from far and wide, getting through traffic, etc. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see you all again. Cheers.